Hi everyone, it's Connor once again. Today I'd like to take the time to talk about one of my most favorite concepts in improvising in general. And this is something that has been misnamed, or it's been misnamed over the years. Some people would call this just a straight bebop scale. Some people call this a David Baker scale. Some people, they might have other names for it, but I like to call it extra note rules. And I'd like to talk about it within the context of a dominant 7 scale, because 2 videos ago I gave you the scale outline for B-flat blues, and again, because we're dealing with mostly dominant chords in that form, that's why it makes sense to talk about this particular concept on a dominant 7 scale, okay? So the premise of extra note rules, the way I like to explain it is like this. In music, our ear likes to hear strong resolutions. You know, when you hear some sort of a cadence, you want that to resolve back to the 1. You know, or in jazz, something like 5 to 1, or something like that. The ear wants to hear strong resolutions. And in jazz, strong resolutions are what make you sound good. And the way I like to explain this to people is extra note rules are kind of like a cat, like an animal, a cat. For some reason, cats have the innate ability to always land on their feet. Even if I threw a cat towards the ground with its back facing the ground, and I had the goal of trying to make it not land on its feet, it would somehow magically still land on its feet. Now, what the heck am I talking about here? What I'm talking about is extra note rules allow us in almost any given situation to make strong resolutions by resolving on chord tones. Now, what do I mean when I talk about chord tones? For a dominant 7 specifically, that means scale degree 1, 3, 5, and 7. So, for instance, for a B-flat dominant 7th chord, our chord tones are B-flat, D natural, F, and A-flat, because they're the 1, 3, 5, and 7 of that particular chord. The non-chord tones would be everything else that's left, the 2, the 4, and the 6. So for a B-flat dominant 7th chord, the non-chord tones would be C, E-flat, and G, or scale degree 2, 4, and 6. So this whole concept of extra note rules is going to allow you to make strong resolutions to these chord tones by allowing them to land on the strong parts of the beat. Now, what do I mean by the strong parts of the beat? I essentially mean beats 1, 2, 3, and 4. Like in a measure of music where it's 4/4 time, just right on beat 1, 2, 3, or 4. That's what we call our strong parts of the beat. And then the off beats are the and of 1, the and of 2, the and of 3, and the and of 4. So let's get into what extra notes do. When I start playing this first one, you'll immediately start to hear this degree of chromaticism that if you've listened to any sort of jazz before, you've probably heard before, but you didn't really know how to explain it before, but this is what it is. So our first rule for extra note rules on a dominant 7 scale, and I'll do it for a B-flat dominant 7 scale, is that if we're talking about descending lines, in other words going from high to low, like on a keyboard or any sort of horn or anything like that, if we're talking about descending lines, the first rule in order to make those chord tones land on the strong part of the beat is we need to put one extra note between tonic or scale degree 1 and scale degree 7 in order to make those chord tones land on the beat. So what do I mean by this? Let's say I'm going to play a B-flat dominant 7 scale going down. I'm just going to do 1 octave, but I'm only going to use the notes of the scale. I want you to notice something. If I tap my hand to show the strong parts of the beat, look what notes of the dominant 7th scale land on the strong parts of the beat. So 1, 2, 3, 4. If you paid attention, you'll notice that the non-chord tones ended up landing on the strong part of the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4. In other words, we got those non-chord tones, or scale degree 2, 4, and 6, landing on the strong beat instead of the chord tones. So all I have to do in order to make the chord tones land on the beat is just add an extra note in between tonic and 7. So I'm going to add an A natural in addition to all of the normal notes of the B flat dominant 7th scale, and look what happens. 1, 2, 3, 4. Did you notice that the chord tones ended up landing on the strong part of the beat, or when my hand was tapping? So listen and watch again and you'll see what I'm talking about. 1, 2, 3, 4. The 1, 3, 5, and 7 of that dominant 7th scale landed on the beat. And that's what extra note rules will do for you. They make those chord tones land on the beat. So it's pretty cool. So that first rule applies for scale degree 1, 3, 5, and 7. All you have to do is just add that extra half step between scale degree 1 and scale degree 7 in order to make the chord tones land on the beat. So if I started from scale degree 3, this is what it would sound like. All the chord tones still landed on the beat. What if I started from scale degree 5? It's the same rule. You just put in that half step in between tonic and 7. Same thing if I start from scale degree 7, way up here. I just put that half step, or that extra note, in the same spot to make the chord tones land on the beat. Now, if at this point, if you're having trouble hearing the difference that extra note rules make in order to make these strong resolutions happen, don't worry about it too much because it's kind of a new concept right now, but over time you'll begin to hear, oh, I can understand, why adding in those extra notes helps things line up. So let me speed up the tempo when I play through these, and you'll hear that degree of chromaticism that you've probably heard at one point or another a jazz soloist utilize at some point. The ear can hear those strong resolutions because those chord tones are landing on the beat. So there are more rules than that. The second rule is also for starting on a chord tone. If you start on the 3, the 5, or 7, we already know that we can add in that extra note between tonic and 7. But if we start from 3, 5, or that flat 7, we can also add in half steps between scale degree 3 and 2, 2 to 1, in addition to 1 and 7. So this would be our 3 half step rule. So I'm going to start on the 3rd of B flat 7, and I'm going to add in half steps in between 3 and 2, So that's where that half step would be. I'll add in a half step between 2 to scale degree 1, and that's where that half step would be. And I'll add our first half step we learned about in between 1 and 7. So in other words, I'm going fully chromatic from scale degree 3 to flat 7. So if this rule would be 3 half steps starting from scale degree 3. So if on B flat 7, that would look and sound like this. I'll do that one more time. You know, if you've listened to people like Charlie Parker and he said something like, you know, when you hear that degree of chromaticism, your ear can hear that strong resolution by putting chord tones on the beat. But if you've wondered what it was, that's what it is. It's just adding in extra notes in order to allow the chord tones to land on the strong parts of the beat. So there's 3 half steps. If I started from the 5th scale degree of B flat 7, I can use those exact same half steps, but I'm starting in a different place. So here's starting from the 5. I can do the same thing if I start from the flat 7. It all works out. So those are the rules for the chord tones on a dominant 7th scale. But what about the non-chord tones that I talked about in the beginning? We can still make our chord tones land on the beat, even when we start from a non-chord tone. So check this out. If I start from the 2nd scale degree of B flat 7, which would be C, my first rule is that I don't add any additional notes. I just play the notes of the scale. And all the chord tones still landed on the beat. It still worked. So that rule applies for starting from scale degree 2, scale degree 4, and scale degree 6. In other words, our non-chord tones. So let's say I chose to do 0 half steps starting from scale degree 4. That would look and sound like this. Right? I could do the exact same thing starting from scale degree 6. Everything still lines up. So that's the rule of 0 additional notes for non-chord tones. Here's the last rule. For non-chord tones, they have one additional rule. Instead of doing 0 half steps, they can have 2 half steps that occur between scale degree 2 to scale degree 1, which is right there, and scale degree 1 to scale degree 7. So those are my 2 extra notes, or my 2 additional half steps. So I can start from the 2nd of B flat 7, put in 2 half steps, and then still have the chord tones on the beat. There you go. And I can do the same thing starting from the 4 or 6. That's from the 4, here's from scale degree 6. So I can start a scale from any scale degree and make all the chord tones land on the beat. So I'll do the entire B flat dominant 7 scale, starting on every scale degree and going down. So I'll do everything twice. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. when you really master these extra note rules, it's going to serve as, I hate to say filler, but it's going to serve as the connecting material between the individual ideas that you come up with, whether it's based on a third, you know, a triad, a fully diminished chord, you know, anything, or even just a fragment of a scale. When you have mastery of extra note rules, then you can make everything you play have strong resolution, and it'll sound good to you, and it'll sound good to your audience. So take the time to really internalize these rules, and I'll see you in the next video when we put it all together to try to improvise over a blues. Thanks.